Welcome everybody to the Cybersecurity Awareness webinar training. My name is Autumn. I'm with the Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to thank Kira Truesdale, who helped put this whole thing together. She's been an amazing cybersecurity intern for us here at the Chamber. So to move forward through this agenda, we're going to do some introductions to everyone who's presenting. We're going to get some idea of what is happening around cybersecurity as our current local trends, common types of cyber attacks, best practices, and resources that you can use in your business, as well as questions at the end. So to start off, I just want everybody to introduce themselves, and we can start with Captain Lawrence.
Morning, everyone. Captain Lawrence, captain of the North Coastal Sheriff Station. Happy to be here.
Hello, I'm Jessica Contreras. I am the IT Director and Chief Information Officer for the City of Encinitas. And I'm also a member of San Diego InfraGuard, which Darren will touch on later.
Hi, I'm Darren Bennett. I am Chief Information Security Officer for the City of San Diego previously, and also former FBI cyber. I worked on the San Diego Cyber Squad. I am also a member of InfraGuard, as Jess just said. Thank you.
All right, Cameron Matthews. I work for a company called Nth Generation. I'm what's called a virtual CISO, which really means that I'm a fractional, or I'm a CISO for multiple organizations, over a dozen of them. Many of them commercial sector, but some of them are cities, K through 12, colleges, different educational. And I have a 28-year background doing cybersecurity for the U.S. military. That's me. Thank you.
To start, cybersecurity has become a critical component of every industry, sector, and household. What it is it's really a way to empower you to protect your digital information online and your computer network for your business, your family, your organization. What we've seen is that cybercrime impacts all organizations regardless of size. You could be an individual entrepreneur and be impacted, or you could be a very large entity like Microsoft or Google and be impacted. Currently, the average cost from recovering from an incident, it just for a minimal incident, it's 1.8. Captain Lawrence will be able to give some more details, but it can go a lot higher than that. Why we're here today is that we believe cybersecurity awareness and education is really a way that we can prevent cybercrime locally, and through the chamber and through outreach with your organizations and your businesses. We're really hoping to empower you and provide you with tools where you can remain secure, and as a whole, our entire community can remain cyber secure.
Thank you, Jessica. So I wanted to give a brief overview of some of the national trends that we're seeing, and then get down into some of the San Diego trends. And a lot of this information is available via the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, or IC3. They have an website, ic3.gov. A lot of this information, again, is available there, along with their staff studies and some of the information that's been put out from the FBI and Congress related to cybercrime. So let's dive in. So for the national trends in 2022, they had over 800,000 complaints that the FBI received. That was a decrease from 2021. However, the total loss of cybercrime, and again, it's really hard to put a number on, but what they've been able to say so far for 2022 was 10.2 billion. And as you see on the slide there, that's quite an increase from 2021. Sometimes you hear crime doesn't pay. Well, in the instance of cybercrime, it does pay. There are individuals and organizations that are making a lot of money doing this, and it's becoming more and more prevalent throughout the world. Nationwide, ransomware continues to be the #1 threat, and that's usually facilitated by phishing attempts via email. So as you train your staff on how they secure their emails and your firewall settings, what's allowed to come in and out. It's really important to continue training. I know some organizations do fake phishing attempts to see what their employees are clicking on. So we would recommend doing that just to as another facet of continuing that training. Because once that software gets into your system, they can take control quickly, and some of the outcomes are devastating. So phishing attempts we're seeing now are being increasingly facilitated by ChatGPT. So let me rephrase this. So actors who English might be their second language or they don't speak English, they're using ChatGPT to formulate emails that look more like a English speaker or someone from your organization is sending the email. So in the past, you saw emails that came through that the grammar would be off, or words were used improperly, and you could tell they were, fishy. And so you didn't click on any of the links or anything like that, but they're getting better. And that's with AI's assistance. So AI is good. It can also be used for evil. So just, be aware of those kind of things moving forward. Supply chain attacks are a real major concern. I have SolarWinds attack that occurred a few years back. They're still counting the organizations that were compromised. They're up to 30,000 different victim organizations, and they don't even have a price tag that they can put on that. But essentially their supply chain was attacked and taken over with a kind of a Trojan phishing ransomware, all combined software that hit, and very devastating. So again, it continues to be a trend, and just as you're, again, locking down your systems and training your employees, some of these instances may be good to bring up, just what has happened in the past, because there's not a whole lot new out there. They're just tweaking how they come at it. Data breaches. So Jessica had mentioned earlier that about $1.8 million could be the remediation for a data breach. On the national level, the FBI records 4.5 million is usually how much it costs for the remediation of a data breach. There have been some really significant data breaches recently, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but really know when you're using the cloud, what type of configuration you're responsible for using a vendor. Maybe it's Google or Amazon or another cloud provider. Sometimes we think when we're uploading information to the cloud that company is now responsible for the security. That may not be the case. So you really need to look at the fine print on when you sign into these type of agreements with the cloud companies on who's responsible for the security of that information and who's responsible if there is a data breach. Cryptojacking. So these are people that are breaking into your crypto wallets and stealing your currency. We have seen a decline, and that's based off the decline in the value of cryptocurrency. As you can see, in San Diego County alone, the FBI recorded that there was an $80 million loss in 2022. So that's hefty. And they're not only going over big businesses, small businesses, but that's personal losses included in that total as well. And as you've probably heard in the news, depending on which media outlets you're listening to, threats from nation-state actors are on the rise. Russia, North Korean, Iranian, and Chinese affiliated groups using ransomware to fund wars, to fund nuclear programs and gather intelligence, whether it be against our own military or whether it be espionage related to stuff that's patent theft, what individual companies are developing, espionage related to the corporate scene. So again, lock down those systems. So to jump into San Diego trends, so this is more close to home. What we're seeing here locally, the number one right now is the non-payment, non-delivery scam. There were over 28,000 instances in 2022. And if you're not familiar with that, it's when you're potentially buying something from a scammer, or a scammer buys something from you and there's no payment. And that's based off typically identity theft and other instances of that nature, or goods are being delivered to a false address. So businesses have been heavily impacted by that in San Diego. Personal data breaches, there was over 8,000 instances last year in San Diego alone. Investment impersonation scams, which is very self-explanatory. You are clicking a link, whether it be on a website where it comes up as a chat bubble, how can I help you? And or with an investment scam on an internet site that maybe look like it's affiliated with an investment company, but it's actually a false website. People are clicking links, and once they click that, software is uploaded, and here we go. Extortion or ransomware, we had 4,700 instances last year in 2022. So again, it's a very lucrative way to finance your criminal enterprise. And then a tech support type scams. So again, back to the investment impersonation scam. This is when you're on websites looking for support and a little bubble pops up with, "Hi, my name's Chris. How can I help you?" You're clicking on the links, and next thing you know, your systems are invaded. So there was 4,400 instances of that last year. And so I know Darren and Cameron are going to get into this a little bit more, but again, can't say it enough. Keep your systems up to date, validate and verify. Just a little anecdotal story before I move on. One of my buddies who owns a business here in San Diego, just a personal story. He was out $90,000 this year, and it was essentially off a investment impersonation type scam. Someone was able to gain access to his email and his signature block. They were able to send an email to one of his finance employees requesting a wire transfer of $90,000. Because the email looked legitimate, it had his signature block, it came from his email address, that transaction was completed. And he's still working with the banks to get that $90,000 back, which probably won't happen just because of the nature of the email. And it was an employee error is what they're going to lean on against him. So again, I'll hand it over, but thank you for your time, everyone.
Cameron's now going to share some types of cyber attacks.
Sorry, I was still trying to get off mute. Okay, these are the common types of cyber attacks that we're seeing every day. Again, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for quite a number of different organizations, including commercial, state, local. So we're seeing these across everything, right? So there's nothing that only exists and occurs in one sector. As Captain just got through saying, Captain Lawrence, you now have foreign nation states, China, coming up against you. So don't want to scare you, but you've got to understand that they're trying to get to whatever your information is, especially any kind of sensitive information, like what we call PII, personally identifiable information. They can use that for identity theft. If you have credit card numbers, maybe an Excel spreadsheet, they'll try and get a hold of that stuff. Your personal health information. So that's all being used right now to make money or to extort you. And a lot of that goes down onto the dark web. So these are the types of attacks that we're seeing in order to make a lot of that stuff happen. So let's talk about ransomware real quick. Okay. So ransomware has actually changed over time. So the term ware is like housewares. It's something that you buy, but it's an old term for something that you gain, something that you have, okay? So in the olden days, back when ransomware first started out, someone would send a phishing email, okay? So again, this is all about the phishing, and it all ties back to itself. And somewhere, like in an attachment, there'd be some sort of like an executable or an app, a program. Somebody would download it because of what we call a ruse. Okay, so a ruse is something, it's a fake story, or it's something that causes whoever's reading the email to do something, right? And Captain Lawrence also talked about a lot of that stuff. So, let's say that they want you to, I don't know, buy gift cards or something like that. But in order to do that, you have to download this app, click on the app. Well, what would happen originally, way back when, is you would click on the app, and whoever the user was that was running that program, that ransomware would begin executing, and it would encrypt all of the files that that person could touch. Okay, so all of the files were no longer usable. You try and open it, it just looks like a bunch of gobbledygook. And then right after that, this window would pop open with the ransom. Okay, so it would say, you have to give me a certain number of whatever cyber coinage, they were interested in. A lot of times it was Bitcoin, in order to get your files back. So if you did that, then they would hopefully give you the master key and you could decrypt the files. Now, of course, the interesting thing there, the conundrum is, I'm going to give money to a criminal because I'm going to trust that that criminal is now going to give me the key. And of course, a lot of times that doesn't actually work, right? But that's kind of the bet. You have to, should I really do this? Do I have another way of recovering, which is backups? Okay, so that's another thing. Please keep good backups. I think Darren's probably going to be talking about that in a little bit, but that's your way of recovering. Okay, so the hackers, see, this is the back and forth between the hackers and the defenders, the bad people and the good people. The hackers figured that part out, so they changed their tactics. Now what they do is, if that person from the phishing email clicks on that link or downloads that attachment, starts to run it, now it opens up a back door. And the hackers come onto your systems, whatever that happens to be, maybe your accounting system, maybe you've got a small HR system, whatever. They'll get in there and then they'll elevate their privileges. They'll become something like an administrator, someone who can do lots of things and especially touch lots of files. Then they start cruising around the place looking for whatever valuable stuff that you have. Unfortunately, they realize that people were using backups. So now they'll go and they'll delete the backups, then they'll encrypt everything, and then they give the ransom note. Okay, but still, you've got to use those backups. Okay, that's the number one way to protect against this. So now everybody kind of like got used to that, and so they developed a new one where it's just like the old one, breaking in, elevating your privileges, becoming like an administrator, searching for valuable data. And now what they do is searching for valuable data, the stuff that you are trying to, that's very important to you, like what the captain said, intellectual property, something that's special. And then they'll pull that data out and they'll put it on the dark web and they'll sell it. And then they'll go on to the rest of it, including encrypting the files and demanding action. So later on another slide, I'll be talking about some of the resources that you have available so that if you are taken down by a ransomware event, you can go online. The FBI has a place, CISA has a place, and I'll talk more about what CISA is a little bit later. So they tell you how to recover from it, what to do, what the normal methodology is for dealing with the hackers, etc. Okay. I covered a lot in ransomware, but that's because that's really, really huge. And oftentimes, like I said, phishing leads to ransomware. So with phishing, it's what's called social engineering. They're trying to trick you. The hacker's trying to trick you. And as Captain Lawrence said earlier, they have these different ways, these tricks, and they're asking you to do things like, send money, either through a gift card purchase, wire transfers are really big. And with a wire transfer, they will give you an account number and they'll say, hey, in order to complete this transaction, you need to wire the money. And then after the money's wired, they'll actually move the money to a secondary account, kill the first account, and the money's just gone. So I've been called in for quite a number of those. I immediately refer them to the FBI because that's really deep, and I don't have the ability to try to recover. So as it says there, they oftentimes will pose as a coworker. Especially now we're seeing a lot of what's called smishing. So it's just like phishing, except instead of coming over an email, it's coming over text messages. Okay, I'm sure you all have gotten that. It's pretty much the same kind of stuff. I get it all the time from one of the owners of my company. Hey, Cameron, I'm in a meeting. I need this thing really fast. Can you do this? Can you, go buy gift cards? which is kind of hilarious because, you know, the owner has never asked me in the past to buy gift cards. So you just have to kind of use your brain to figure out what's going on. Okay. Also, a lot of times the tone in either the phishing email or the smishing or vishing, which can be voicemail, by the way, is very urgent, right? Something's going on. I need help. You know, I went over the border. I've run out of money. Please, you know, send money this way, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a big one. Email compromise there is where a hacker can take control of somebody's email account. In fact, I think we just got through talking about that. They can make it look like they've taken over control, or they actually can, usually by having stolen some sort of credentials. So they're able to log into somebody's Gmail account or whatever, and then they use their contacts to spread malware, to, you know, have, again, just like, funds transfer to them, that sort of thing. So email compromise is very, very big, oftentimes from phishing or because you did things like using the same password in multiple places. So you definitely don't want to do that. EFT fraud, as you see on the right, that's another one. We kind of already covered that. I've encountered it a lot of times when people are buying houses or they're buying property. In that case, that's what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, although I think it's now person in the middle or whatever. So that's where the hacker somehow intercedes and becomes in the middle of what the buyer and the seller think is just the two of them talking, right? And they can use business email compromise. So your emails are going to the hacker and the hacker's forwarding them on, and like that. So it just keeps bouncing around the place. And then as soon as the seller says, hey, this is the target account number for the wire, the hacker changes that, forwards the email on, the seller, the buyer, does the wire transfer, and then all of a sudden everything's gone because the emails are no longer being bounced around because that middleman went away, took the money out of the account, and he's gone. So that's how a lot of times EFT fraud and wire transfers will occur. So the last one that we have down there is direct network attacks. Okay, so this is where the hacker is coming straight at you on your marketing website. Maybe you've got some sort of an employee portal, right, where they can log in and they have access to HR stuff, time cards, whatever. Or you have an e-commerce website where you're selling products, services, whatever it happens to be. So as Captain Lawrence said earlier, you've got to keep everything up to date. Okay, especially patches, any kind of security patches. That's the first thing they do. I'm what's called an ethical hacker, right? So I do the same things they do, but I do it, with the permission of whoever the owner is of the website. And then I produce, if I can get in, I produce a report, and then the owner then can close those holes. First thing I do is I do exactly that. Is there anything that I can touch that is missing a patch? If there is, there's usually an attack already pre-configured and ready to roll. I just go in there and boom, now I'm inside of your systems. So patching is number one. And then you have to properly configure whatever applications that are running. So definitely make sure that you've read up, because oftentimes online they'll have how to secure this app or that app, especially if it's by whoever the manufacturer is of the website application. Now, a lot of times, if you're a small, medium-sized business, what you're doing is you're actually kind of outsourcing it. So you're using a commercial marketing, website that everybody else is using, right? That's a little bit better because then it's incumbent upon them to keep the patches up, to configure everything. You're now in their hands, but hopefully you've chosen a platform that a lot of other people are using. So they're taking care of that for you. All right, and that was everything I have for this slide.
All right, thank you, Cameron. Again, I'm Darren Bennett. I was the Chief Information Security Officer for the City of San Diego. And I also worked for 8 years on an FBI Cyber Squad. I really enjoyed it. And the biggest thing that gave me that I think is unique is most people that have worked in my role as a CISO, I was also CISO at the Supercomputer Center, they get exposed to a handful of large intrusions in their entire career. Whereas I saw hundreds of intrusions from everything from a small mom and pop organization all the way up to Fortune 100 companies. And I think that really gives me a unique perspective, but it also has helped me realize, there is a lot to be done to keep your system secure. And I like the analogy of, it's like owning a car. You own a car, you know what the best practices are, which is change the oil, get the brakes done regularly. But for some things, you also recognize that unless you're a mechanic on the side, you probably aren't going to have capability to do all of those things perfectly. So you need to involve the right people. Now, I'm not a consultant, but I can tell you, don't be afraid to reach out and to pull other people in. And we'll go over it. I've got 3 slides here. They get into some complexity. I don't want anyone to get scared. These will hopefully just help you with some of the basics. As I say on this slide, there is no silver bullet. The closest thing to a silver bullet that I've seen out there is good backups. Because unfortunately, if everything else fails, even though that may take you some time, the ability to recover it's invaluable. Like any system, your computers, your technology, they have to have multiple layers. And I have a little picture of a castle here, but you can think in a castle, when they were defending themselves, they didn't just have one layer of defense. They didn't just have a wall or a moat or a lone archer out front. They had all of those layers. They had a moat, they had a drawbridge, they had walls, they had inner walls. And why? Well, that's a layered defense approach. The idea is if somehow the bad guys get past the moat, then now they have to get through the drawbridge. Then they have to get past the archers. Then they have to get, and they found that to be very successful for, I think, obvious reasons. Well, in the cyber world, we do the same thing. We start on the outside and we figure out what are we doing to protect our systems from those outside entities. And then we work our way all the way back until we're at the end user's desktop or the homeowner in some cases. What can we do to protect that person that's sitting at their computer at home? Again, this briefing is just a good start. It's the tip of the iceberg. I wanted to start off with just a couple quick links. One of the key things that I do when I am out working with an organization is I ensure that they are using a security framework. It's very difficult and challenging to secure something if you don't know what those critical items are that you need to be looking out for. I mean, I use the car analogy. Most of us know in our car what fluids we need to keep up to date, when we need to change the oil, etc. Most of us, or many of us, don't know that about cyber. And even those of us like Cameron and myself and the captain and everyone on this call who do this for a living, there's a lot to it. So I strongly recommend you take a look at these frameworks and at least get an overall understanding. Do you know every detail? Probably not. No more than you would if you looked at an automobile manual. You may not know everything, but at least you get an overall grasp of, wow, there's a lot to this. Who do I need to ask about these things? So this is my very busy and a little bit too crazy slide that they teach you in any presentation thing not to do. So I'm going to kind of zip through this, but I mean, these are some of the basic best practices. And then after this slide, Jessica and I are going to tag team breaking some of these down into a lot more detail and just emphasizing some of the lower hanging fruit that is important. From my experience, it's all about preparation, prevention, reaction, and recovery, and then rinse and repeat. So, the most basic step is have an incident response plan, have a plan, know what you're trying to do, know what you're trying to protect. I know there was some famous person who used to say this, but my father drilled this home to me my whole life. He said, Darren, if you don't have a plan on where you're going, you might end up somewhere you don't want to be. When it comes to cybersecurity, none of us want to have that security. None of us want to have that. You might find a cooler route another way. You need to know what's happening. Also, identify who's responsible. I kind of led to this or implied this on the prior slides where I said, it's if you have a car, unless you are a mechanic, it's good to have a mechanic available to you. Whether that is someone in your IT group, whether you have a dedicated CISO because you're a larger organization or a huge security team, or, I mean, you guys want to guess who my mom and dad use as their security expert? yes, they call me. And I respect that. I mean, that's important. You know, we don't all have those big budgets. Finally, next, create a contact list and know who in your organization to work with. You know, at what point do you want to contact the executive team or legal or your risk department or your IT folks? Have their numbers handy, and I encourage you to have relationships with them ahead of time. How do you do that? You get involved in the community, you go to some of the events. There's a group called InfraGard, and pretty much anyone can sign up to become an InfraGard member. They do some basic background checking, but it's a very useful way to hear what's going on for latest threats, and to also just get to know some people out there in the community that are specialists. Let's see, what else? Buy cyber insurance. Again, this is a decision you have to make. Cyber insurance every year has, as you can probably guess, gone up in price and covers less. It's kind of scary, but in spite of that, it's still important to have it for, at least for any larger organization that's hosting sensitive data. Use a MSP. It's funny, I think Autumn was looking at the slides yesterday, and I think she made a comment next to this one saying, what is this? And I love that. You guys don't be afraid to call me out if I get off on a acronym, but a managed service provider is someone, I think kind of what Cameron does, only he does it at the executive level, but it's a company that specializes in managing your systems for you. So you don't have to have an entire team. Well, they have managed security providers as well. And what they can do it all. I mean, they can do it all. They can even put a person on site, or you can have them bring a device, put a device in line with your systems that monitors your network and manages and alerts on bad behavior and helps you. Frankly, that's the way a lot of organizations are going, because it's very costly to have your own team. Of course, know which systems are your most important systems and protect them accordingly. Back to my castle analogy. If you have a castle, you have your armory somewhere in that castle. Guess what? That's behind a thicker wall with better locks and better doors and additional guards. They don't treat it the same as they do the mess hall or the dining room. You need to know the same. You know, where is our financial data? Where is our super secret sauce? And protect that. Educate your users, including yourself. There's a lot of good training available online. Some of it is free. And then I love that Captain Lawrence and Cameron and Jessica, all of us are going to say this over and over again, but keep your systems patched. That sounds so obvious. That's like saying keep air in your tires in your car, or keep gasoline in the thing. I don't know about you, but I've run out of gas before. I've also found myself with my car tires too low. The problem with patching is it's challenging because you have so many patches that are coming out. But honestly, it's so critical. Very rarely when I worked for the FBI for all that time did we go to an organization that had been compromised, that had bad actors on their network, where the bad actors got in using some new secret super technical vulnerability. They knew, they looked for unpatched systems and a known vulnerability that someone could have just automatically updated the system and fixed, was what the bad guys used to get in. So we don't want to make it that easy for them. We want to make it hard. And to do that, use the auto update ability of your software packages in your operating system. And also, the other thing that's important to know is like Microsoft Office, your Adobe tools, your desktop apps, those have updates as well. And it's very, very important to do that as well, because the bad guys will leverage those. I said, think before you click. Cameron did a great job of describing this, as did Captain Lawrence. But, you know, I always say that the internet should be treated kind of like a big city. I grew up in a suburb of Boston. I love the city, Boston, but I also do not walk around trusting when I'm there. You know, or maybe I trust but verify, but I think you need to, anything that comes in your email is, you cannot assume it is what it says it is any more than someone in the city. You can assume that when they come to you and say, hey, I know your brother so-and-so or your cousin, I've got a message for you. You have to really think that through and verify. When in doubt, if you get an email that you're not sure of, look up the phone number for the organization yourself. Don't take a phone number that's given to you in that email, and call the organization and ask them if they sent you something. That'll help. And then finally, I'm going to say it again, have good backups. And I like to call them recovers, not backups, because if you're not testing them and periodically doing recovery, you don't know if those backups are good. And there's been so many times that I've ended up at an organization that has had a really life-changing situation for that organization, a really huge event. And they go, well, we have good backups. And they look to their IT team and they start to try to recover, and they realize they didn't have great backups. And that makes it extra sad. So on to some of the best practices. I hope this is a good start. Again, I encourage you guys to reach out and get active in the community. Let's see.
One of the things that we can do at home and at work is utilize strong passwords. The longer and more complex the password, the harder it is for any hacker to break that password. Right now, a basic minimum is 12 characters. If you can do 16, it's even better. Your password should be something, what I like to call a passphrase, which means a sentence that you can remember, or a very complex password that you can't remember on your own. I have an example at the bottom, which is after the beach, we eat burritos. And you can see it's a combination of special characters, numbers, uppercase, and lowercase letters. So to start, it's really important you're using complex passwords. I also recommend having a really long PIN for your debit card. A lot of people, when I type in my PIN, they're like, what are you doing? And when I share with them that I work in the field where cybersecurity is really important, they start to understand. So it's really important as well that you have a very long PIN associated with your debit card.
The next one is use multi-factor authentication. Most of you probably know what that is, but I'll give you the 2-second summary, which is, regular authentication is a username and a password. Unfortunately, in the modern world, literally millions of passwords have been compromised by bad guys. When a very large organization like Facebook or Microsoft or Google or whoever is compromised by bad guys, the first thing they do is they dump the passwords and they try to crack them. They have great success at that. Well, unfortunately, people use the same password for multiple things. First of all, you want to have unique passwords, which can be very challenging. But then also one step that's even better is if you use multi-factor, what that's doing is it's saying, hey, I have my username and password, great. But then after you say, here they are, and you click OK, it wants to send a text to your phone. It wants you to use your phone to enter in a code. So it's something, it's something you have and something you know. And that's 2-factor. That's kind of the minimum I would recommend. And it's really, really good for things like bank accounts and critical accounts. Until recently, at full disclosure, I didn't do that kind of thing with some of my social media. I am now doing that with most of my social media as well, just because I don't want to get embarrassed. But if you're not using 2-factor, where it requires you to, after you enter your username and password, to enter something from your phone, like a text or a numeric number to verify you're who you say you are, you really need to enable that. The beautiful thing about that is if someone has compromised and somehow gotten a hold of your username and password that you've used out there in the world, the bad guy still has to have your phone. So, could they possibly steal your phone? Yes. But then they would have to know how to get onto your phone. So you're really making those layers of defense. Again, you're adding additional layers. 3-factor is a whole nother thing. And that's where you add something else like a biosignature, like a thumbprint or a physical card that you insert. And then you still have that second factor where it can send something to another device, or where it can, it asks you for a username and password. I know this is all complex, but really the simple part of it is have a good username, change your passwords regularly, and require at least 2 factors, meaning require it to send you that additional text message to your phone asking you to enter that information into the website. One site I included on here is a thing that's called Have I Been Pwned? The term pwned is a hacker term. I don't remember exactly what the P came from. Maybe Cameron knows, but it's basically hackers speak for owned. And when they talk about you being owned, they mean that they have compromised your system. They have your information. They own you. And we don't want to be owned, but I encourage folks to go to this website and enter your email address, your primary email address that you use. And I can tell you when I enter mine, it comes up in all kinds of database leaks that have happened with major companies. Now, fortunately, the biggest thing with that, it just tells me, yeah, at one time my password was compromised, but I change it regularly.
Hey, Darren, can I jump in real quick?
Sure thing, please.
Okay, so Darren was just talking about social media. Now, as an individual, right, if I don't enable MFA, or sometimes what's called two-step authentication, that gets used a lot, you're going to be able to hack into my TikTok account. I'm just kidding. I don't actually have a TikTok account. But for businesses, LinkedIn, I know, Darren, I know, right? I always do this. For businesses, LinkedIn is the #1 social media. So if somebody takes over your LinkedIn account, now you've got some serious problems. They can post some really damaging things. They can mess with your, your overall profile. So LinkedIn has two-step, that's what they call it. So please enable that for your business.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Cameron. Thank you. Not just for your banking data, which obviously is critical, but even things that may not seem as critical, people can definitely abuse them. The other thing they can do with that, and I've seen it when I worked at the Bureau and in my CISO roles, is if they compromise a social media account, then they start sending messages as if they're you to people that would trust you, and they can deceive them. And it's a slippery slope. So yeah, thank you.
One of the things that we discussed earlier was the castle model, and knowing what you had that was important to you, your jewels, your armory, and documenting where that was. It's really important that digitally, you know where your information is. So you might use the cloud to store certain information, and you might have certain systems on site. It's important that you know both the hardware and the software that you're using. You need to make sure that you know the vendor, who to contact if something goes wrong, who to contact to know if something needs to be patched, the make and model of what you're using, or the version. When this comes in handy is really at 2 points throughout the information lifecycle. First, you're able to use that to know when you need to patch or where you go for patching. And you can then verify also that you have automated patches on. So it's similar to knowing how often you should change your oil or what pressure you should have in your tires. You need to have all that documented. It's also useful if you have been breached to recover. So, or if you're locked out of an account, to follow up and start to work through the multi-step process to get everything restored. So it's a critical step. At first, it can be time consuming, but once you have your inventory in place, as long as you keep it up, it just becomes a part of what you do day to day. Just like you keep track usually of how often you get your car maintenance and what type of oil you use, what type of gas, those type of things. We've been talking a lot about patching, and what that really is, on your phone sometimes or on your computer, you'll receive a notice that there's a software update ready for you to install. That is a patch. Really, patches are, and software updates are the most critical thing to keeping any sort of computer system stable. So it's very important that you're implementing those updates on every device you have. If you have a TV that's connected to the internet, it should also have automated software patching enabled. If your child has a PlayStation or some sort of game controller, there are patches being deployed for those as well, software updates. So it's really important you know from your inventory that you need to keep those patched, as well as your PCs and your software. This is your most basic line of defense. We at the city have what are called penetration tests, where we hire an ethical hacker like Cameron to come in and identify where we have vulnerabilities. And they hack into our system essentially when we know, and they tell us how they were able to get in. And frequently it would be because there's a system that's not patched. So it's important you understand those things. All organizations struggle with staffing for this. There are some tools that can assist if you're a larger organization. So it's good to look at those patch management solutions if it is something where you have a lot of devices. And then Darren can share his experience with the FBI here.
I think I already did earlier where I was saying that, you know, I worked hundreds of incidents and 90+% of those could have been prevented from ever happening if the properly patched and protected. And that's kind of depressing when you think about the amount of money and resources and time that's lost. Yes, it's time and resources to keep things patched, but it's that extremely old saying, and what is it, ounce of prevention, pound of cure. In this case, it's a time very, very well spent. All right, and this is one of my favorite topics. I've already said there is no silver bullet. I personally feel that antivirus is no longer super helpful. It's something that we still utilize in organizations that I'm associated with. It's one of the layers of defense. However, endpoint detection and response has really been growing. And some antivirus companies now include this in their product and some don't. Again, it's up to you to decide how many layers you want, what complexity, and et cetera. But what makes antivirus is dependent on usually dependent on a signature. So if they've seen something bad happen, they know, okay, this malicious software has this signature. It looks like this, or it tries to go to the following known bad website, so we're going to block it. That's great if you have that signature. The problem is the bad guys have gotten very creative in recent years, and they have polymorphic malicious software now that changes every time it runs. Now it does the same basic thing, but it changes just enough that it can't be detected by signatures. Well, what the security community has done, and it's really great, is they've developed endpoint detection and response. It's called EDR, and it utilizes artificial intelligence. I know that's the big word of the year, right? Artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And by doing that, what it does is it says, hey, wait a minute. You know what? Jessica's here and she's working away on her computer, and the EDR is an application that's running on her computer, and it just is very lightweight, and it watches what's going on, and not in a big brother way, but in looking for bad. It's not snooping into good. People get sensitive about that, but it's looking for bad. And if suddenly Jessica attempts to encrypt her entire hard drive, for example, which is what ransomware does, as Cameron was saying, where they will encrypt your hard drive so you can't even get to your data, and you have to pay them to get the key, and if you're lucky you do, but you never know. Well, if suddenly Jessica's working away on her computer and she tries to encrypt her whole hard drive, this product would say, well, wait a minute, is this normal behavior for Jessica? No, it's not. All right, well, I'm going to block it, alert the security team. They can reach out to Jessica and say, Jessica, did you intend to be doing this? And sometimes she may have said, oh yeah, you know, most organizations encrypt their drives. Most that I work for, the IT folks take care of that for you, so it wouldn't be an end user. But it's kind of that last line of defense. So I don't know what the analogy in the castle would be there, other than maybe the very last guy with his sword defending the treasure chest. But if they get past the moat, they get past the wall, they get past everything else, and now they made it all the way to your desktop, and they're about to encrypt your files and lock you out. So it's another thing that I think that, backups are critical, updates are critical, and certainly having good endpoint detection and response software that does it automatically for you is super important. Thank you.
Another thing that's really important is having some sort of filter so that malicious things don't get into your email box or your OneDrive or whatever in the cloud system you have, your Google Drive. Hopefully, it also text messaging you can filter out. So what a filter does is what the filters that we use at the city do rely on artificial intelligence, and they open the files before they are received in what's called a sandbox. And if that file has what is seen to be malicious code, and often you see it because it's reaching out to 1 million IP addresses at once, or it's trying to encrypt things, then they put that into what's called a quarantine. And it means that you will never see that email and you won't click on it. What they also do now that is really valuable is they'll check links and see if those links are known to be malicious. So you're supposed to hover over a link and anything that you receive through email. The challenge is on your phone, it's really hard to hover. So having a filtering that does check those links is really valuable. Some of the examples include Microsoft Defender, Avanan, and the Gmail spam filter. And again, most people have Gmail accounts. How many of you have walked through how to secure your Gmail account? It's really important to understand, and it's even better if you do use a third-party application above and beyond what is provided. Another line of defense, we saw the wall around the castle, is what's called a firewall. And this is something that if you have a network, and you might also have, most devices also have a software-based firewall on them, it prevents unwanted traffic, so known malicious addresses, which are all assigned an IP address, similar to a mailing address when you're sending mail, to come into your network. So the firewall, you're maintaining a list of what to block and what's allowed. There's something called Stix Taxi that most firewalls have that can automatically be updated with known malicious IP addresses, but still sometimes you'll get alerts that there's an IP address that's above and beyond that you need to block. Darren's going to go through a really easy way for smaller businesses that don't have large IT staff to secure based on geographic location.
If Darren can find his unmute button, that is. Technology is hard. No, so geofencing is what Jessica was leading up to. And basically, if you have that firewall, that's really useful. And they determine what needs to be blocked there, either based on signatures, based on known certain files have certain characteristics that are bad and they prevent it. But you can also do it based on geographical location. Geofencing is creating like a virtual boundary. So basically saying, hey, you know what? I know that I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but I know that area is trouble, and I don't want my children wandering over to that area, and I don't want the people in that area coming over and playing with my children. It's way oversimplified, sorry. But, we know, as was said earlier by Captain Lawrence, we know certain countries are known for, they really, really are proud of the work that we're doing here in the US, I guess, but they really want to steal it. And I have to dance a little carefully on how to say this, but, we want to do business with them, but we also don't want to be taken advantage of by criminals. So a lot of organizations will block some of those countries. They'll block the Russias or the Chinas, or they'll block certain areas and only explicitly allow trusted folks, trusted organizations from those countries through their firewall. And that's a very effective way of decreasing the threat. That way you can still do business, your people can still communicate, but you're decreasing those risks. It can also be done, it can be done at various levels. I use the firewall as the example, so that's what Jessica just talked about, but you know, you can do it with software on your actual system. I've worked at organizations where at the email system level, we've even said, no, we're not allowing emails to come from certain geographical regions because those areas are known for trying to mislead people into giving out financial data. This is a balancing act, and it's like everything in the cyber world. You know, you have to balance your needs and your risk with your business requirements, but it is very effective.
Another thing that's useful is what's called a virtual private network, or a VPN. I know many of you have probably logged on using the wireless at a hotel or at a Starbucks. And some of those networks, they're designed to be open. So it's really easy for a hacker to sit on there and to sniff for your data. And Cameron, if you have a story you want to share about the benefit, I think this is a good time. If you want to just share really quickly how people hack if you don't have a VPN.
Absolutely. So the problem when you don't have a VPN is, you know, you go into the Starbucks, you hook up, now you're getting on your bank, right? So you're into your account on your bank. All this information is flowing back and forth. Those credentials, right? Your username, your password, depending upon the bank, hopefully the bank knows what it's doing, but you'd be surprised. That username and password isn't going over in the clear, right? Because you could have a hacker sitting there doing what we call sniffing. And by the way, that's one of the things I do, Wi-Fi penetration tests, to where I can see all the traffic. With a VPN, what's happening is from your machine to wherever you're trying to go, it is encrypted. So even if I'm sitting there and I'm either pretending to be a bad guy or am being a bad guy, you know, I'm not going to see anything. So that's why VPNs are super powerful. They're really good. A lot of times, yeah, you'll use a VPN so that especially your employees, they can be at a Marriott or whatever, and they can hook all the way back into the office, but they can do it securely. So VPNs are very powerful, and you should definitely be using them.
Yeah, so the VPN essentially scrambles the data so that when that person sniffing sees your data, it just looks like garbled gook. They can't interpret what they're seeing. I use a VPN on all of my personal devices and within the city as well. Everyone VPNs back. So from a mobile phone to an iPad to a laptop to a PC, you should be using VPN to ensure you're on a trusted network, and people that are not on that network or that you might not trust are not looking at your data.
Right, and artificial intelligence, again, we spoke about this a little already. Artificial intelligence is simulating human intelligence processes with machines, basically. We've gotten in recent years to the stage where it can be done pretty effectively. I don't know if any of you have used ChatGPT or Google Bard. They're very powerful, and I even talked about there's a good and a bad side to it. You know, on the good side of things, we use it to help fight bad guys by, you know, learning normal activity of our users and seeing if something abnormal happens, maybe putting a halt to that and validating with the user before we allow it to happen on their system. On the bad side, you know, Captain Lawrence gave a really good example. It used to be that when phishing emails came in, emails that were trying to mislead us, a lot of times there were spelling and grammatical errors, because those tend to come from a lot of times from foreign countries, people that English isn't their native language. Unfortunately now, if I was to go into Google Bard or ChatGPT and say, write me an email to the president of some company asking blah, blah, it will do it, and its grammar and English will be better than what mine is. And I'm from here. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword. It can be used for good or bad. There's some other examples here. You know, there's deep fakes. It means that they're able to now put your image on things and make it look like you are someone else. And they're able to mutate malware. I think we talked about that, where some of these tools that we have that are signature based and they look for a specific trait in the malware. Well, they can now make it so that when they send that malicious software and normally it would be detected, now instead of being detected, they tweak it just a little. So every single time it is sent, you need a different signature for it. Now, the beautiful thing is AI can help solve that problem too, because it can say, well, wait a minute, it doesn't match the signature in a literal sense, but hey, wait a minute, it's doing all of these other things, all these characteristics together, and it can use that intelligence. The thing I'd say about AI is you want to make sure that you have policies and procedures in place for the folks in your organization that are using things like ChatGPT and Google Bard. It's very hard. The internet's forever. And I tell people that regardless of if we're talking about AI, but especially with ChatGPT and Google Bard, if someone puts sensitive information into those, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to get it out. So if you put financial information or personal health information in there and ask it a question, it might give you a great answer, but it's very difficult to get that out. Even more so than, I mean, you don't want to do that in Google. You don't want to do that in any online thing unless you know it's trusted, like maybe your medical offices or something. But especially there, you want to make sure there's clear policies on when and if people can do that kind of thing. The analogy I've heard is that it's kind of like, you know, I teach adjunct faculty at a local university. If I tell my class something that I shouldn't have, and they go out and start sharing it with friends, I might have limited success in telling the class that I don't want them to share it anymore. The problem is we don't know who their friends shared it with. We don't know if it's been taken out of context. The same kind of thing can happen with AI. And it's, yeah, it's very powerful, but it's also it's a double-edged sword. I don't know if Cameron or Jess or anyone want to add to that, but.
Yeah, it's very, very tough. ChatGPT right now, they scan the entire internet, just dump reams of information into it. And then, yeah, people are throwing stuff in there like, oh, I need a last minute report. I'm going to take the secret formula from my pharmaceutical company, throw it in there so it'll dump out the report for me. That data is now there. And oh, by the way, I, as a bad guy, can now make a particular query or what they call a prompt, and I can get that data back out. So if I can do that, believe me, hackers, foreign nation states are sitting there with groups, and that's their job. They're just firing that data in, trying to extract stuff out, because it's the craziest thing. I asked ChatGPT to create a very detailed data governance program for a target company, not for me, not for my company, for a different company. I won't say who. You should have seen the sensitive data that ended up in there about their data protection. I was just blown away. So yeah, make sure you don't put any sensitive data, either personal or business, in there, because people can get to it. All right, I think this, nope. I think this is somebody else's.
Darren, do you want to share about training?
Sure. I mean, for me, that's every one of these topics is super important. But I mean, besides backups and software updates, also training. I mean, training is one of those very core top 4 or 5 things. I mean, if you're not educating yourself and your staff on best practices, how can you possibly know what needs to be done and protect yourself if you don't have that awareness? I know if I go to a big city, and I love using my big city analogy as much as I love using the castle analogy, but if I go into a big city and I'm not familiar with the city or what the good areas of town are, or maybe the ones that are a little more challenging, it's probably not wise. And that's why it's so important all of us, whether you're an expert in cyber or you're a home user or you're a small business, that you go out and you find and seek training. It's also a good idea to do annual security training with your organization and all your members and require it to be done. It just goes over a lot of the basic stuff we talked here. It goes over phishing and what it is and how you need to protect yourself against it. Where do you get those? I think the best thing you can do is go to websites like the CISA website. And CISA, I'm sorry, I forget their acronym and they'd be very offended, but it's a Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. And
Bingo.
they're an outstanding group and they have a lot of excellent information. If you do a Google of CISA recommended cybersecurity training, you could do it for small business, enterprise, home user, and they will provide links. I think I provided some earlier on, but you can get more. The other thing that's always good is just reach out to local colleagues, become a member of some of these local groups. Like I talked about InfraGard. You can check out InfraGard, Google InfraGard San Diego, and make sure it's the valid link, but you'll be able to tell, and see when their next meeting is and attend and get to know some people. The expectation in there isn't that everyone is a guru, because I think the more we do this, the more all of us are humbled by, wow, there's so much to learn that we still have more to learn. Jess, I don't know if I covered everything for you sufficiently, but
the good thing is the chamber has developed for you a cybersecurity resources guide. So you can visit there. All of the resources that we've been sharing in this learning workshop will be there as well. So it's a good place that will launch you into these different areas.
All right, I'm going to jump into this one here. Okay, first off, and this was a test. Just want you to know I didn't fat finger this and I didn't type it in wrong. No, this was really a test. That would be stopransomware.com. That's not correct. It's actually .gov. Stopransomware.gov. Okay. Yeah. So I did screw up on that one, but so Darren was a little bit earlier. Let me start from the top here. CISA. So CISA, as Darren said, it's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So what that means is at the federal level, it covers everybody. It covers all of the US. So it has a bunch of stuff there for small businesses, as you can see, small and medium size, as well as regional information about security. Now we are in CISA Region 9, which includes California and my hometown, my home state of Hawaii. So you can get all kinds of information that's very valid about who, where you are, where your business is, just by clicking on this stuff. I'm not going to go through these are huge websites, but if you take a look at the one, especially right there, Cyber Guidance for Small Businesses, it's great because just like some of the frameworks that Captain Lawrence talked about earlier, it's an action plan. These frameworks, they just tell you, have one of these, do one of these, get an EDR, get antivirus, do backups. So you can just sit there and just roll through that, without having to be an IT or a cybersecurity guru. So the one that Captain Lawrence talked, one of them, the CISA or Darren, the CISA Top 18, literally that's what I use for all of my commercial groups, because it's an awesome framework. You get it, top to bottom, left to right. It covers everything, including training, testing, asset management, which Jessica hit on. It's, you might think to yourself, I know where my stuff is. I know where my software, where my hardware is. No, I'm willing to bet you don't, because I'm the CISO for small organizations all the way up to global multinational organizations. And usually they don't. They think they do. You go in there first thing right off. They don't. So that's number one. And this information and those cybersecurity frameworks will lead you through them. So that's CISA. Stopransomware.gov. That's another place where you can go, and it's this one-stop location. You can get a whole bunch of tools. You can figure out, like, okay, I got hit by ransomware. What do I do now? Or you can see, okay, how do I try and beat ransomware? All right, there goes Darren. He's going to fix it. Yes. So it's a super useful tool. And when you go on these other websites, you'll see they all link back to stopransomware.gov. because that's just that central location for all of this. That is a thing of beauty right there. All right. Now, Darren talked about this earlier, the IC3. That's a FBI platform, so you can go there to report any kind of cybercrime. So a lot of the stuff like wire transfer fraud, right? That human in the middle, that's what it is, not person in the middle, human in the middle kind of attack. That's the kind of stuff you want to go up on the FBI's platform and report it, especially if we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions. I've seen that happen too. San Diego Regional Cyber Lab. This is awesome. And I think this is a creation of Mr. Bennett. It is an awesome resource that we have here in San Diego. So it has virtual labs where you can do stuff, you can learn things, you can practice with different tools, as well as a physical lab. That's amazing. I have not seen another one of these. I actually created what's called a cyber range where you can do attack and defend, but it was all up in AWS, right? It was all purely virtual. There's an actual physical lab you can go to get hands-on. So that's really impressive. Definitely take a look at that one. The Encinitas Chamber of Commerce, we talked about that a little bit before. It's got some great stuff, right? Free webinars. So it's presented to you, in a nice, easily digestible format. And that's the link right there. Definitely go in there and take a look around.
I think this one's been covered already by Cameron, and I just emphasize that, I mean, he nailed it. I would say that the good thing is to, get to know these organizations before you need them. It's kind of like know who the good mechanic is before you need him, because then you're not looking for the right one at the last minute. The LECC Law Enforcement Coordination Center is an incredible resource if you feel that you've had financial loss, if you feel that hackers have come in and stolen PII. What they will generally do is they will generally determine who the right group is to hand that information to and act as an intermediary, and they do a great job, whether it be the FBI or Secret Service if it's involving credit cards, or some other CISA if it involves just general security. And the other ones we already spoke to. So yeah, good stuff.
Oops, definitely, as was talked about in an earlier slide, figure that stuff out now, right? Do you need, get the phone numbers, get the email addresses, get the websites. Don't wait till something goes wrong and then you're like trying to Google around the place. So if you have an incident response plan, that's normally where this stuff goes. I had an incident. I got hit by ransomware. Somebody came on and, so the encryption part, or somebody grabbed our information, put it down in the dark web to sell it. And one of these services says, hey, your stuff is down there. Who do you talk to? That's in your incident response plan, where you should chain what you're going to do, your little run book, your playbook, to the kind of incident that went down. And this is where you record exactly that kind of stuff. So, because trust me, when it's hair on fire, see, I don't have any, it just gets super crazy and you're panicked, all this money went away. You're going to want to be able to pop open a plan and just roll through it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for all that great information. I'm going to stop screen sharing just so we can maybe take some questions from anyone in the audience. I know I have a couple things that I want to say as well. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and then we can answer those. All right, I'll take that as not much going on right now. I just have a couple things. First of all, we talked about managed security providers, MSPs. The chamber actually has two chamber members who do this. So if you are not interested in controlling your cybersecurity and really want to have someone come in and help you, please reach out to me or find those providers through our directory. And so we do have some MSPs in-house here at the chamber. And then the second thing I wanted to say is just a question, like if anyone could just do like one or two things today to feel a little bit more secure, what would that be? maybe Jessica.
I would recommend really just making sure you have patching on automatic, if possible, for everything that you own. And then start to look at what security controls you have in place. I also would recommend that every business has an incident response plan. And it might be a good idea for the chamber in the future to have an exercise where people can test their incident response plans, where you guys can talk through, okay, what do we do if our business email has been compromised? What do we do if we have ransomware? And you guys can actually walk through as different businesses what you would do and think it through. We do that a lot, and it helps, because then when you are impacted, it's second nature and it's a reflex versus having to be really nervous at the time of when you really seconds count.
Great. Eileen, I noticed you unmuted. Did you have a question?
No, not a question. Thank you. This is all great information.
Okay.
I feel like we have a company called Bayside Networks that does all of our IT, and a lot of this is stuff that is already in place. There's something that we do for staff, though. It's an online program called Know Before, like KNOWBE, the number 4, and it's training for staff, because we've all fallen victim to the simple little, the gift cards scam, I want to change my payroll, direct deposit. So I think just continued education for staff, like, why would Jim, my CEO, be texting me? And, so just continuing education is our biggest thing. But I do feel like we're kind of in a good place, but there's always, they're getting smarter and smarter. So there's always room for improvement. So this was really beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
Yeah, the great part about Know Before, by the way, another thing that it does, and I'm not shilling for Know Before, but it does testing. It'll sit there and send you, phishing emails. And then if you mess up and you click on something, it will actually pop up the training that is specific to the thing that you just messed up on. So it's like instant feedback. Yeah, you're an idiot. And oh, by the way, your boss does get a report. So that's the kind, I know it's kind of like cyber shaming, but it's cyber shaming with a good reason, right? It's like, hey, stop messing up. You need more training, that kind of thing. So yeah, Know Before is awesome.
Definitely.
Another one that our staff really enjoys is called Ninjio, and it's a cartoon format. And every month they get a cartoon and a quiz, and it's been a hit.
I'll make sure to add these to our website as well.
My experience with all these is that it be more reward based than punishment based, and Cameron alluded to that. If you implement these things and you say, if we catch you responding to a phishing email, then that's going to result in a warning. And this, maybe if they do it 10 times and they just don't seem to learn, yes. But initially, my experience is you have a lot better success if you reward someone that reaches out to you and says, hey, I think I've been phished. I might have clicked on something I shouldn't have, because you want them to tell you so you can research it and protect the group. And yeah, they're really powerful tools. And I think, people respond a lot better to that.
Awesome. Okay, guys, if there's no other questions, I think we're just finishing up here. And I just want to thank Jessica and Cameron and Darren and Captain Lawrence and Kira for helping put this together. And this webinar will be right up on our cybersecurity resources page on the Chamber website going forward. So thank you guys so much.
Thank
All right,
you.
thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Appreciate it.